On today's podcast, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Colman Noctor. Colman is an assistant professor of mental health and nursing at the University College Dublin and is also a child and adolescent psychotherapist in private practice. Today, we touched the surface to speak about the impact that technology has on young people's mental health and their developing mind. We also discussed the impact that bullying has on young people, how prominent it is in today's society, and discuss steps that can and need to be taken by both schools and parents, and also steps that can be taken by children themselves who are a victim of bullying. Colman has a weekly column in the Irish Examiner. He has published and presented at many international conferences in the area of child and adolescent mental health, and is also the resident child psychotherapist on the Ray Darcy Show, and has his own podcast, Asking for a Parent, which I'd really encourage people to check out. So let's jump into today's podcast and really hope you enjoy it. Maybe we can just get straight into it, Coleman, and I suppose just talk about the impact that you're seeing maybe through your own practice, the impact that technology is having on young people and on their mind. And I suppose as part of that question, maybe specifically as well, the impact that social media specifically is having on the development of a young person's brain, and what maybe you're seeing kind of coming in out the doors of your own practice, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on, Robert. I mean, the background to this is, I suppose I would be a fan of technology. I would be someone who would
Mm.
use it quite a bit. So by no means a kind of a conservative dinosaur when it comes to kind of, all machines are bad. But I did find that it happened to me when my daughter was born in 2012, and I shared a picture of her on Facebook or something. And over the next few days, I was kind of saying, that's grand now that I won't have to answer loads of questions. I'll just put it up on Facebook, it'll be like a PA for me, and it'll
Yeah.
manage it. And then over the next 24 hours, it was just all these notifications about questions about, not questions, but lots of comments about how beautiful she was and how she was perfect
Yeah.
family and all this sort of stuff. And then it started to stop. So it started to dry up a little bit. And I remember thinking, there's, I was far more interested in the people who didn't like it than the ones who did, and I was kind of going,
Yeah.
why did they not like my picture? And I remember thinking to myself, if I can get sucked into that as what was I at the time, 36-year-old, person who's been through 7 years of personal therapy, who should
Yeah.
be, I kind of what it is to be well psychologically adjusted. What is that like for a 13-year-old girl who's trying to find her way in the world? And it opened a whole can of worms. So I began to talk to young people about their online world and what it was like. And they didn't draw a distinction between online and offline. It was just their world, And so
Yeah.
it gave me an insight into it. And I think the impact is so much more subtle than we believe it to be. I think we think about cyberbullying, we think about pornography, we think about um, probably gambling, that sort of stuff.
Mm.
These are the thin end of the wedge, if you ask me. There's a huge, more subtle influence that technology has on our well-being than
Yeah.
that. And I think it's basically as this. I think technology gives you what you want, but it will never give you what you need.
Mhm.
So if you let technology know that I love donuts, well, then they're going to give you donuts all day long, and it's not going to
Yeah.
say at any point, Coleman, you've had 15 donuts today. Would you not chance a drop of water? It's
Mm.
going to just keep giving me what I want, not what I need. And children are poor regulators. They don't have a sense of self-regulation, of saying, I've had too much of this, I'm going to come away from it. And in order to use technology right, you have to be able to self-discipline.
Mhm.
And when you ask a child to do something that they can't do in a environment that is all about agitating your desire and keeping you on screen and keeping you, like, the design of technology comes from gambling, casinos. It's about, collecting all the points, staying on, like, your time on screen is the only dashboard that is of interest to the tech company. So things like autoplay the next video. You watch something and then it plays something similar to what you just watched before, and you end up in a sinkhole of 7 hours of watching cats on skateboards when
I
you
know.
sat down.
Yeah.
So in essence, to answer your question, I think it asks too much of the child brain in terms of self-regulation. When the spirit of engagement to technology is about excess. It's about unlimited, all you can eat data, binge watch. All these things are celebrating excess. And in order to keep safe, we have to be moderate. And those two things don't match. And children are just not very good at calling that, I think,
Yeah, and just
understandably.
yeah, of course. Yeah, even for ourselves, I think it's challenging. So to expect a child to kind of have that ability to stop, just even in relation to the likes of TikTok, and it's like this 60-second video, and I almost kind of relate. It's somewhat similar to opening a box of roses, and you unwrap the sweet and you eat the sweet, and you're not finished, and you haven't got enough, so you're there and you're already opening and unwrapping the next one. And it's a little bit like I'd find clients that they have found themselves kind of lost on screen for like an hour, could be 2 hours, and just don't even remember where the time has gone, and for young people then, are you seeing specific kind of disorders coming from that? How are you seeing it affect them, I suppose, in relation to their mental health or just their overall
Yeah,
well-being, really?
yeah, I don't think you see a lot of people referred for a technology issue,
Yeah.
but you get a referral for somebody with anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorder, and undoubtedly the technological world plays a role in
Mhm.
that. And again, I would say to you, say for example, the use of algorithm. So the algorithm, the more vulnerable you are, the more you search, and the more you search, the more you reveal. So from the point of view of, I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I had turned 40. I was having a bit of a midlife crisis, and I looked up.
I'm nearly there. I'm nearly there.
Well, I looked at this ad for a slender tone belt, and Robert, I don't know if you know what a slender
I
tone.
do. I do.
The device that sends an uncomfortable electrical current through your stomach and gives you 6-pack abs in 8 weeks. Anyway, so I
Yeah.
looked at this anyway and thought, okay. And then ever since then, I've been getting pictures of chiseled 24-year-old torsos to my timeline, and I've been offered pre-workout drinks, post-workout drinks, all this sort of, and the algorithm has no concept that I'm a 43-year-old man struggling with his midlife expanding
Yeah.
waistline, and so it keeps giving me what I want rather than need. So if I'm a young girl who's wondering how to lose weight and
Mhm.
I'm looking on Instagram for weight loss techniques, then the technology is just going to send me more and more, unresearched, unevidence-based
Yeah.
stuff. If I'm a child who's looking up how do I self-harm, the algorithm is not going to say this is a 13-year-old searching that. It's going to give me more and more. So the idea is that the what you bring, if there's no product, you are the product. Do you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
there's no product in social media, so you are. So your data that you give gives the companies the information to target you. And oftentimes what we search is what we're vulnerable about, what we wouldn't ask
Of
somebody.
course. Yeah.
And so we tell our intimate secrets to Google, and Google decides how to answer them in a largely unethical way. Um, and so for me, it isn't maybe the chicken and egg. Does it cause a problem? Not really, but does it add to it? For sure. And everything
Exacerbates
is
it.
like, so something like bullying, exclusion, these things have happened since time memoriam, but the avenues for bullying somebody now, the 24/7 nature of it, the manner in which I can exclude you now from a Snapchat group or whatever it might be, there's so many more avenues to do it. So our desire is not any different than it ever was to be mean spirited to each other, but the avenues and quality from which we can do it is much, much different. Do
Are
you know what I mean?
far, far
So
broader.
a 12-year-old in the 80s who was interested in exploring their sexuality probably had a friend's brother who had a magazine that was passed around half the town. Now I can just 2 clicks away from whatever
What
level
it?
of pornography I want.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the desire is no different, but the access is. And that's the qualitative difference. Do you know what I mean? It is that lack of regulation or sense of regulation that gives us a tyranny of choice that absolutely overwhelms us.
Yeah, and often I suppose when people get to that stage of having the phone in their pocket, and whatever age the child might be when they get that, or the young adult, uh, you have a very very powerful tool at your disposal, like instantly. Like, so when it comes to things like gambling and sex addiction and, like you said, pornography, it's so difficult to stop yourself, that sort of habitual, behavior is getting really, really ingrained. And I suppose for young people specifically, whether it's kind of, TikTok or, whatever social media platform they're on, eh, in relation to that, is there a specific age that you would think that, yeah, I know it's the big question. I'm not there yet. I've only a 4-year-old and 6-year-old, but is there a specific age that, children should be left have a phone?
The answer is no,
Mm,
because, and I would just say it depends on the child's level of cop on, right?
yeah,
So I
that's
know
your book.
11-year-olds. It is, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But I'd know any 11-year-olds who I'd be perfectly comfortable with their use of online portals. There's
Yeah.
17-year-olds I'd have grave concern
Hmm.
about their maturity to do it. So that the age is not going to work. The issue is, um, and a colleague of mine, David Colman, used to say, when you're comfortable with your child watching pornography, give them a phone. That's the decision you make. But that's not necessarily realistic because they will get it much before that. But what I'm saying to you is it depends on the child's ability
Of course.
to manage it, and the sensible child who shows a degree of common sense on the offline world will be the same online. But the vulnerable child who's vulnerable in the offline world will be the same. And like, if you're giving someone a device to interact with your friends and you're 12 years of age and you get it for your communion, every social faux pas, which you're supposed to make as a 12-year-old boy between then and 40,
Mm.
um, is going to be screenshotable. Do you know what I mean? So everything is indelible. Once you release that information, you release ownership over it. So when you are going for a job in 10, 15 years' time, you have to be comfortable that your employer is going to be able to look back and find
Uh-huh.
your digital footprint. And if you can trust that your 12-year-old is going to have a good digital footprint that's going to stand to them when they're 30, um, then yeah, have it. You know,
Yeah, I often thought about that. We just kind of got out of that. I'm similar age to yourself, but it's like if there had been pictures taken of many of the things that we were doing when we were younger, as there, no, but anyone Harris now, but it is quite frightening of how vulnerable young people are. Even just doing very normal things, and
but it's the capture of vulnerability.
yes,
That's
exactly,
the
yeah,
thing. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
You might have said something stupid in front of three of your mates
yeah.
standing on a wall, and they
Hmm.
told four other people, right?
Hmm.
The incidence now is that I can record you doing something and it
Yeah.
can travel. And you might not be able, if you want to change schools because of that incident, you might know that for 40 kilometer radius, every school has seen your video. Do you know what I mean? So from the point of view of where do you go? Do you know what I mean? So the impact of these social mistakes. And the greatest thing about being north of 40 is that you did all your stupid stuff before the internet. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah, yeah.
but you asked me the question, you said, oh, mine are too young to be, and they are. But when you say, when do you introduce your child to technology? You've introduced them already.
Oh yeah,
I'm
yeah,
guessing they know how to work the Sky Plus. I'm
yeah. Oh
guessing they
yeah,
know
yeah.
how to, so
Mm.
technology is not just one thing, it's all of it,
Of course,
and
yeah.
I'll give you an example of how I think technology has impacted on our expectation of the world, because you go up and I went up to buy something in a Circle K station, and the girl said, oh, I'm sorry, the tap is broken. And I must have given her a look that said, you mean I have to press four buttons, and she kind of apologized. But I thought to myself, she's like, I've pressed four buttons 6 months ago, it's not a problem. Why is it a problem now? And it's a problem now because the easier something becomes, the harder the easy things appear. So the impact of technology is that everything's so. If I get a date, I just have to swipe left and right. If I have to have this, I just do this. And emotional relationships and friendships and the important, valuable things don't work in a swipe left, swipe right issue. So everything about the technology narrative is gratification based, but it's not fulfillment based. And I can go to the gym if it was open today and I could spend 9 hours there. I will look no different when I come out of it than when I went in. If I trained 3 times a week for 30 minutes for 6 months, then I'd
Inconsistent,
see a
like yeah.
difference. Do you know what I mean? And so the difference between fulfillment and gratification, fulfillment isn't sensational enough for the online world. It's all about extremes. It's about viralness. It's about clickbait. It's about hitting those 1, 2, 3s and 8, 9, 10s. When in actual fact, the 4 to 7 is where we're at safest. So these are all the ways in which the technology influences culture to be unhealthy, and our children are born into the fabric of that culture. So by default, it is having an impact on their well-being, their pressure, and their resilience. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course, yeah. And just in relation to the brain and it not being fully developed, maybe till roughly 25, roughly, like what impact, like possibly could technology, social media be having on the young person's brain? Um,
The biggest area I would see is in frustration tolerance. Do you know what
yes,
I mean? So
yeah,
from the point of view of, I'm sure you're old enough to remember Chartbusters and
yeah.
Extravision, and you go down and you get the movie and you put it on and you're going, this is a bit of a slow burner, but we'll stick at it. It
It's
might get
fu-
better.
It's funny,
You know,
actually. It's a great. It was. We were only talking about myself and myself. We were talking about this recently. Actually, that was a lovely thing, process to go through on a Friday night. You'd go to the DVD shop, and there's a lot of things have been just lost.
but I see myself now, and the tyranny of choice is that I'm on Netflix going, oh, Robert said that was good, but oh, someone else said that was very good. That's a lot of, and then I put it on, and if I don't like the credits, I'm snipping over to the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
one and
yeah.
next one. So the disposability means that we lose our skill of perseverance, we lose our skill of frustration tolerance, and we expect things to be as immediate as it would be. And if it
Mhm.
doesn't reflect technology, then it's not good enough. You know what I mean? And we judge things by its speed, convenience, and gratification, quality. And that's where relationships run into problems. You know what I mean? And I wrote about this week about the kind of exclusion issues. Exclusionism is horribly difficult for children who get excluded from different groups. But the notion of friend and unfriending, it has changed the narrative of how we understand those things to be. So if you're not of value to me anymore, you're almost disposable.
Mhm.
And the disposability of relationships and how we can betray, hurt, and be vulnerable to other people. As much as we have a culture that is embracing diversity and inclusivity, there's another other side to it that makes, yeah, I just think it's we're our perseverance, our frustration tolerance, and our stick ability is probably being compromised by, well, you're not of any value to me anymore. And Sherry Turkles tells this lovely story about these children who went to a museum, and the guy talked them through the fossils and how they found the bones of the
Mm.
dinosaur and how they reconstructed it. And they said, well, what did you think of that? And the children said, it would be better if it moved. So the thing's interactive ability
Mhm.
meant way more than its meaning or its context or what it took to find it. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
So we're judging things by different ways. It's about how can you entertain me as opposed to how can I learn something from you. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. And the value of friendships and
Mm.
the importance of actually connection and feed. That thing for children, like of being disconnected a lot of the time. It, there's no really healthy connection from social media, and if kids are vulnerable, and I'm sure you see this, like I see it even with young adults coming in, that they're looking external to themselves of what's going on in other people's lives. And obviously this is just a snippet of, the perfect aspects of their lives, and it can be really challenging and destructive for a young person, seeing that and looking at that all of the time when they themselves might be very vulnerable and struggling, and whether that might be anxiety or just poor self-esteem. Um, it's definitely something. Do you feel in that kind of sense when that's going on that people should pull back from that a little bit, or that young people should pull back, from how much they expose themselves to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the social media is a highlight reel of
Mm.
people's lives. So it's not reflection
It's not
of
real, yeah.
what's real. But the idea is that we compare ourselves to the the desire of others. I don't know, you might not be a Harry Potter fan, but there's a Harry Potter
Oh,
movie
yeah,
and
yeah.
well, there's a thing in the first one called the Mirror of Erised, which is the mirror of desire. So you look into it and you see what you want, this
Mm.
hoped for self. And basically for me, social media is like we can all see each other's mirrors of desire, right? But in that book, Dumbledore says to Harry, men have wasted away wondering if what it shows is real or even true. It does not dare to dwell on dreams and forget to live.
Mm.
So the idea is that we get engrossed in the other and the highlight reel of other people and trying to keep up or trying to get and almost we forget to be ourselves. So you have this performative thing that, I call it the Tinderization of society, where, my profile is what's going to be swiped left or right. So I have to put in the witty one line, the best picture, the filtered image, that, whatever. And it's so we're outward facing that if I don't get the swipe left or right, then all the inward stuff is of no value. You know what I mean? So everything is front facing. And when we get so bogged down in the external variable, we lose the importance of the value of meaning, courage, kindness, generosity, all those value systems that are way more nurturing in our self-worth and self-belief than being good at something or being confident at something. And I think from the point of view of, we have probably over invested in portraying confidence, which is how we project ourselves to other people. And maybe we're under investing in the relationship with yourself, which I believe is the most important relationship you'll ever have in your life, is the one you have with yourself. But um, it's again, it's the distraction or the siren's voice of the highlight reel of everyone else that tends to, weapons of mass distraction. That would be, in many ways, we have one of those in our pockets.
Yeah. You really want, like, as a parent myself, I mean, I'm always trying to encourage my two young kids to, be kind, but also balance that with being strong. And I don't mean in the context of being physically strong, but, being resilient, in, like, even already you can see little role plays that play out in play school and in primary school at very very young ages, that you're saying, okay, do we need to address this, or is this okay? And this might work itself out. And obviously a lot of time it works itself out, these sort of role plays that play out within kids. But this, when we look at bullying, and where it's an ongoing thing and there's a persecution of a child of some shape or form, um if we can look at that for a minute, like, how should that be addressed? It's obviously extremely complex. I would have had a parent come to me not that long ago whose child was being bullied, and she was coming to me because of how distressed she was with the dynamics and really not feeling supported by the school. To some degree, I do feel that their hands were possibly tied as well with what they could do. But from your own perspective, I mean, what possibly needs to be done there, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think the buzzword is resilience, and I can understand why we want children to be resilient. But I just think we have an understanding of what resilience is. It's not something that is grown out of adversity or trauma,
Of
or
course, yeah.
and there's this idea that if we treat millennials tougher, they'll get tougher. It's not how that works. Resilience is about, what I believe it is having a good relationship with yourself that involves self belief and accuracy. So, I know where I'm good and I know where I'm not, and I'm accepting my limitations and I'm owning my own strengths. And that level of the self is really important when it comes to something like bullying, or when it comes to something, because I won't become the bully because I don't have to impose my value on other people. And B, I may not be as affected by bullying behavior or mistreatment because I know my own value. So to give you an example, two girls standing in the at their lockers, and one's called Mary and one's called Anne. And their friend Sophie walks past, and Mary goes, "Hi, Sophie," and Sophie ignores her. And Anne goes, "Hi, Sophie," and Sophie ignores her. So Mary turns into her locker and says, "What have I done? Why does she hate me? What's wrong?" And spends the next 9 hours ruminating on why Sophie doesn't like her. Anne, on the other hand, says, "Screw you, Sophie," and gets on with her day. Right? The difference between Mary and Anne, a relationship with themselves that is resilient, right? So that's the kind of thing of, I know what I did, and I, more importantly, know what I didn't do. Do you know what I mean? So we kind of look at assertiveness, and these are the things we want our kids to be kind of able to project their own value out to other people in a way that might make them more resilient to the inevitable knocks that life will give them.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, it's much more that they have an appreciation of their own value than it is that they, like, some of the most self-adjusted, well-adjusted youngsters are shy.
Of course, yeah.
But that they're not. they don't have, like, in my research, I looked at the most prolific sharers in terms of social media, and I interviewed them. And most of these people, you would imagine they're announcing themselves all the time. They weren't. They were all trying to find themselves through the announcements. Do you know what I mean? So the again, that confidence and self-worth issue, that we kind of mix those two up a little bit. Um, but for me, if it was trying to instill in your girls a sense of their own value, and their own potential to hurt other people, when you say mean things, it hurts someone else and all that sort of stuff. But also, that you deserve to be treated well, and you deserve, and as Irish people, we're not very good at owning our own value. You know what I mean? And saying, there's a bar.
Well
And if,
done. Yeah.
yeah, but in America, they look at skyscrapers and they go, only in America. We look at the banking crisis and say, only in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? We almost celebrate our failures in many ways.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think I see a lot of children, maybe more so in the years gone by than now, who would find loving yourself as something very narcissistic or very bad, And so I've had to work around the language of giving yourself a break. Actually, is as much as you can foster a child to feel comfortable with, rather than the notion of loving yourself or caring about yourself or prioritizing yourself is almost frowned upon. Do you
And
know what I mean?
what that actually is and what it looks like, and yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And again, I think there's so many things that we have addressed in culture that are so good. There's still some areas of concern, I think, in terms of that stuff, especially around the self-worth stuff.
Yeah.
I do think there's lots of things we could iron out in terms of the way in which our childhood structure is based at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And like it's still so prominent in schools. I mean, what I would often get coming to me is like, I suppose, young adult women who, and men, but more female, to be honest, like that have come in and that have had been bullied when they were younger and they were in school. And I mean, with devastating outcomes, really. Like, I mean, their self esteem, their confidence, even how they view the world, like, so their core belief system. Uh, it's really shattering. Like, and sometimes that has gone on for years. Does it, for yourself with young people coming in? I actually I read an article you wrote there recently. It was really good. And just a part of it, you referred to kind of 80% of the young people that attended your practice like have experienced one form of bullying or another. I mean, that's a quite a staggering statistic. I mean, and like, obviously you're just one person. I mean, and this is a much broader societal problem. But why do you think it is in kind of the world we're in today, where like mental health awareness is maybe at its pinnacle, yet I would experience, even pre-COVID, mental health is probably just as bad now, if not worse, than it ever has been. Um, could you have any understanding of what's going on there?
Yeah, I think there's a dichotomy in society where we have inclusivity, diversity, we've well-being stuff, right? So the company that has, okay, for well-being, we're going to do yoga at lunchtime, right? That's what we're going to do. But I want everyone to have those deadlines met by 2:10, right? So when you put out a kind of an idea that, okay, that's the way we're going to do it, right? It's tokenistic. So if I have a well-being poster at the wall of my GAA or soccer club, but that in reality I invest in the 1% of talent and underestimate the 99% of journeymen, then my poster on the wall means nothing, because the culture, culture eats posters for breakfast. Do you know what I mean? From the point of view of that. And so the cultures are still very competitive, still very, what did you get? What's your points? The expectation of the world. Like when I was in school, you used to go to grinds because you struggled at a subject or you had a rubbish teacher. Now, loads of people go to grinds just to get their mark from a B to an A, right? So the issue here is not that the world has changed. Our expectation of the world has changed. So we want to be the best, and we want to strike out, and we want to make our mark, and we want to be impressive. And the well-being and all that sort of stuff is nice, but it doesn't, the culture of league tables and the culture of performance and the culture of where popularity is the currency of the day, can eat that stuff up for breakfast. Do you know what I mean? And again, I would say the meaningfulness comes from culture rather than from initiative. Do you know what I mean? And it's like people say to me all the time, "Oh, is that a good school?" And I'd say that could be a great school, right? But you could have been the best school in the world, but that third year group are particularly toxic. Or you could be in the worst school in the country, but that second year group are really good to each other. Do you know what I mean? So the value of the culture and how it creates is something that can exist on its own within subcultures, or it can be in big ones. And for me, we have our cultures and is unhealthy from the point of view of you ask any, and I'm talking on sport because I think it's the most obvious one, but I think it peters through a lot of other things. Ask any 14-year-old about playing sport, and they'll say, "I don't do it anymore. It got too serious." Right. So unless you're willing to train Tuesday night, Thursday night, match Saturday, and strive for championships and all that sort of stuff, we kind of don't want you. Right. So there's no five-a-side culture for teenagers. So like I turn up on a Friday night with 11 friends or 10 of us, and we grab a bib each and we play, and whoever wins, it's great crack for the hour, but there's nothing after that. We go home, right? There's nothing like that for teenagers. So if you're not competitive, you're not in. If you're not striving, you're not in. The idea that if you don't go to university, well then, the PLC is something that snobbery, their noses turned up at. So the culture of well-being, diversity, and everyone is great and everyone wins a prize doesn't reflect our reality. The gap between those two things is, if anything, getting greater. Do you know what I mean? From the point of view of that, and I appreciate all the well-being initiatives, and I absolutely get them, and think they're doing something to stem the tide. But I think the issue is bigger than that, and I think that the yoga at lunchtime, but have your deadline met by 2:10, tells me where we're at in terms of tokenistic well-being efforts. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the sport is a good place to look at it, because I'm involved with the underage, under seven, so it's nothing dramatic. But it's you know what, actually it's lovely. It's really good. But it is all about, obviously, at that age, inclusivity, like, and making sure that, no matter how good or not good, which is the right way to look at it, for that a child is, doesn't matter. It's just about fun, and making sure that they're all there and they're having a laugh. And we always tell them, look, we're all good friends now, and everyone supports each other. And, like, but that does change as the years move on, and it changes quite quickly. Like, I think in the soccer, don't quote me exactly in this, but I think it's up until under 9, under 11, and then all of a sudden it gets really serious. Like, it's like within that period of a year or 2 years, and it does change. And I think it's really, really hard, like, for young people that have found that place. And I suppose it's like us having a tribe, and that's kind of sense of belonging, which we all need, is that can be taken away from a lot of young people then all of a sudden. And even if we look at bullying, and another article, which I'm reading lots of your articles recently, the inclusivity, I think, is really important. Like, for people, obviously the opposite side is people getting excluded. And the more time young people spend together, they have more in common. So the other child kind of gets left aside sometimes, and is excluded then from not just that, but other things, and in the schoolyard, and, being invited somewhere maybe at the weekend. And, it is really, you might expand on that a little bit, just in relation to bullying, because obviously there's, physical, emotional, psychological, but what you have seen a lot more of in recent years, is this thing of people being excluded, and it's far more subtle.
It's incredibly difficult because it's very hard to manage. Right. So the issue is, me and Robert are best friends forever, right? But one Thursday, Robert,
we are knowing it,
and Robert says, "I don't be your friend anymore." Right. I'm devastated, absolutely devastated. But can you force Robert to be my friend? No. You can't give out to Robert for not wanting to be friends anymore. And Robert is now pals with 2 other lads, and he's gone off, and I'm sitting on the bench. And how do you manage that as a parent, or as a teacher? Or, you can't say, you have to play with that kid. If you do that, you make it worse, right? But what happens is, and then one of the next articles I'm in the process of writing is called The Negative Bullying Cycle. So I then say, well, there must have been something. So Robert dropped me because I wasn't enough, or I did something wrong, or whatever. So then I try and make a friendship with another person called David, right? But I'm so nervous at doing the wrong thing that I'm just, yes, David, no, David, whatever you say, David, right? And when I'm like that, David treats me like rubbish because he knows I don't stand up for myself and I don't. And, if people give us permission to treat them badly, many of us will expose that. Do you know what I mean? From the point of view and take advantage of. So then David gets tired of me and disposes of me again. So now I'm going looking for John, the third of it. And this, I'm even going to be less like myself now. Now I'm just going to be an absolute, yes, John, whatever, John. And now I've gone from a place of belonging with Robert to trying to fit in with David and John. And so I become less and less myself, right? The less and less of myself I become, the more mistreated I will become. And it compounds the idea that my value is, if you're looking at it in stocks and shares, it's going down, 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 down. And then I just become comfortable in the mistreatment. Then I just become accepting that that's the way the world will treat me now. But I'm only 11, and I've already created a lens that the world just doesn't like me, or I'm not enough. And that I can carry that into my 20s, 30s, can carry it into my
40s.
intimate relationships,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
choices of jobs, my careers, my everything can be seen through the lens of not feeling enough. Do you know what I mean? Which could stem from one Thursday, Robert said, "I'm not your friend anymore." Do you know what I mean? And it can happen like that, right? And my view is that because it's very difficult to deal with, we let it slide. Do you know what I mean? Well, I can't go to Robert's mom and say, you know, he's not including so and so in the party, or you can't ask them. And if it's my parent, it's very difficult as well to say, would you not give him an invite to your bouncy castle because the rest of the class are going and he's not? And
Yeah, yeah.
so um, the teachers are very hand tied as well because they can't instruct. So what we end up doing is kind of having this kind of conversation around values instead of rules. So we're trying to sell the notion of inclusivity and all that sort of stuff. And yes, that definitely has a value, definitely has work. But um, the again, the culture of, yeah, you're not for me. I'm gone. And again, I'm not comparing, saying Netflix is the problem for that, but it's not like the Chartbusters experience. It's like, it's crap, turn it away. There's plenty more. I'll do, and if I have that disposability, then of course that's going to filter into how I see other people. And I think, we've all gone there and said, to get through all these emails, delete, 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 you're not important, you're not important. We're not thinking about the other person at the end of the email because they become disposable. Do you know what I mean? Swiping left and right, like how
Mhm.
discarding of that is,
I know.
you're
Yeah, yeah,
you're not pretty enough, or whatever the case may
yeah,
be, or
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not. So the world has become more cutthroat, and our efforts at counter narrative in terms of inclusivity and well-being, in my view, it's being left behind in terms of its trying to counter that is, I don't think we're keeping up, would be my
No,
sense of
yeah.
that.
And like there when it comes to bullying maybe in the schoolyard, in whatever form that's taking, uh there's so many different uh, factors going on there. Like you have the bully who obviously is possibly bullying a lot of the time because of stuff that's possibly going on for them themselves. So how do you treat that, and how do you deal with that? As opposed to, yes, you can punish the bully, but I mean, does that solve the problem, or does that just create more problems for him? You have the victim who's being persecuted, and you maybe have another bunch of children then who are that sort of flock mentality, who don't want to be on the periphery either. So they just go along with, what is playing out and what's taking place. Um, like, is there a better approach, or does it need to be very much on a policy level? Do you think of schools having a very specific policy on this is how we need to deal with these different types of?
Well, the first thing is, we have to define what bullying is. All right.
Yeah.
So there's robust banter. So I might be the youngest of five, and I call people names in a fun, kind of slaggy way, and I grab people in headlocks, and I mess around and pull and drag. That's just who I am. you might be the eldest of two, quite a sheltered, indulged child, and when I grab you in a headlock, you're getting really upset by the fact, right? So the teacher needs to grab us to a side and say, Coleman, when you grab Robert like that, he doesn't like it, right? When you call him, skinny or whatever, he doesn't like it either. So can you stop doing it, right? So I say, okay. But if I go, aha, now I know Robert doesn't like that, and I keep headlocking you and I keep calling you, then I'm doing something knowingly. So the involvement of intent has come in. So my management of, once the awareness is there and I'm intentionally persecuting you, I would have zero tolerance for that. Right? That just needs to be put on its place. But the issue around how do we get it, the bystander is the key. So if we're in a to do, blah, 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 the bystander is the innocent accomplice, or the silent accomplice. So if we don't revolt against it and police it, it's going to keep going, right? The problem is that the politics are such that if I'm a bystander, I don't want the target to become me. So I'm just going to say nothing, right? And I'll let this fella treat you really badly and be mean to you or nasty to you, and rather than say leave Robert alone, because then it'll turn on me, I'll just be quiet, right? So the bystander then says I'm going to come in on the side of the strong one here, because I don't want to come in on the side of the weak one. So the tribe then forms the alliance behind the likely winner, if that makes any sense. Where if you're going to change culture, you got to change the majority, not the minority. And so majority of children don't bully. They don't, but majority of children don't stand up for people who are being bullied either. So for me, the answer is in the bystander. Try and create a culture of, not that it doesn't have to stand up to it, that it just doesn't embellish it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if we're in an exchange and I'm making nasty comments at you, anyone who comes in and likes my comment is an accomplice.
It's an accomplice.
Do you know what I mean? From the point, because they're adding. Okay. If I've been mean to you and it tumbleweeds, no one comes in on it. I'm not going to do it again. I'm doing it for.
They're getting
validation.
Yeah.
So for me, the bystander is important. The zero tolerance of what is established as bullying, that intent being the key aspect to it. And yeah, I think that the culture of inclusivity being developed by the student group, not by the board of management. Do you know what I mean? If I do a list of this is the bullying policy, I'm going to stick it on the wall. If I go to the fifth class, say, come up with your own bullying policy. What works in this class and what doesn't? And if they make this charter of human rights that they develop themselves within their own group, far more likely to buy in it than a typed leaflet, laminated and stamped in a display cabinet at the reception desk.
No, that's fantastic advice. Yeah. I remember years ago, I was in secondary school. I wouldn't recall now what age, but I'm from Killarney, and there was, at that time, there was only one homeless person in Killarney. Like, I mean, the town would know the person I would be referring to. And I remember walking downtown one lunchtime, and he was there, and I won't mention his name now, and the man was there, and he was a little bit drunk, and he was struggling to get across the road. So I just went up and I linked his arm and walked him across the road. But what happened thereafter was I was being laughed at and heckled at by my own friends. And I remember very quickly, as a young person, you kind of think, oh, hang on, if you do something different, this is what happens. And so it's amazing. Like, young people don't want to be different, like they don't want to stand out for any reason. So I think it's a really good point that you're making, like, that if people can target that sort of group that maybe just go along with it, that we're far more likely to see less bullying, especially continue. And it's
because I think that the bystander is the lighter fluid on the flame. Do you know what I mean? It keeps it going. Do you know what I mean? And I think from the point of view, if you remove that, it'll just die out.
Yeah.
I mean, the embers will burn themselves out. But I like that comment of, it's typical of the three teenagers who all dye their hair blue, and they say we did it because we want to be different, even though they look all the same. Do you know what I mean? So it's different to what,
Yeah. What for a parent? I mean, like, obviously that might be, really worried about their child. They know the child is being bullied, and what steps can maybe they take to support their child? You know.
In an active case of bullying, I would have a path warned to the school until it was resolved. Right.
Mhm.
The longest cases are the most difficult ones are the ones that go on for the long time. So,
Yeah.
child gets bullied in senior infants. The teacher says, "I'll have a word with the class," and says, "I've done that. That's all I'm going to do." Child continues to be bullied for the next 8 years and comes
Mm.
into sixth class completely destroyed. Um, so no way should you let that happen. You should have a path worn until it is resolved. And I'd be pestering unless
Relentless, like,
you're
yeah.
relentless
Mm.
until that was the case. Um, in terms of if your child is going through a hard time and maybe isn't finding their tribe in the school area, try and find it somewhere else. I've seen so many children who would say to you, drama was my savior, sport was my savior, going to speech and language was, speech and drama, or chess club, whatever, music,
Mhm.
art, whatever. Um, you'll find your tribe somewhere. The tribe is, there's a very narrow normative, and if you're in it, you're in it. If you're not, you're out. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist elsewhere.
Of
And I
course.
use the example like the bad things in our lives are like Kiora or my wadi. It's like the stuff, and the good stuff is the water. And rather than trying to get rid of the my wadi, just add in more water. Dilute the bad experiences by good ones. Having the finding your tribe, getting a sense of belonging, feeling valued, all that stuff it might not be obvious. It doesn't change the concentrate of the thing straight away, but you keep dripping that in, and it's going to taste a lot less bitter over time. Do you know what I mean? And in order to kind of, sometimes our life is about the mix of the light and the shade, and rather than trying to eliminate the shades, we need to add in more light. Do you know? Um, that would be my
Yeah, no,
side
that's
of,
fair.
especially in the bullying situation, because it is about self value, trying to get them to remind them of their worth. You know.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, fantastic. I could talk to you for hours. Now, I know you're under pressure, so I want to just go back to something, if it's okay, just because
Hmm.
I do think it's a thing a lot of parents, I suppose wonder about and question. Like, is there a specific amount of time, screen time, that young people should be allowed to have? Like, is there a maximum period of time?
Yeah. Again, I go down. I'm going to give you kind of a non-discrete answer. There's no such thing as good and bad technology. There's only good and bad use of it, right? So I spend like screen time. I don't buy into as a token of measurement. So
Yeah.
I could spend an hour on YouTube learning a song on a guitar. I've come away with a skill. I've learned something fantastic. You could spend an hour on Instagram going through other people's profile pictures and feeling utterly miserable about
Crap,
yourself,
yeah.
right? So the dial will just say Coleman and Robert spent an hour each, right? That's of no benefit to us. So it's not about time spent, it's about time well spent. And never more so in the last year. You've run Zoom classes, you're doing Seesaw, you're doing all that stuff. That's not the same as going onto YouTube and watching, cats on skateboards, or, falling into a sinkhole of whatever it is that you're watching.
Yeah.
So it's much more to say, I want it, like technology is like food. So there's good and bad foods. There's not good and bad foods, there's good and bad amounts of it.
Mhm.
So, a McDonald's now and again is absolutely fine. We can't live without donuts. You need ice cream, but you don't get it only ice cream. You vary the diet into the meat and two veg stuff. And so, from the point of view of when you're looking at your technological diet, it's mixing it up. It's having the right amount of veg, carbs, and protein, and all that sort of stuff. Rather than saying, how much food did you eat today? And this is the maximum amount of food. Because I can have, 6 Mars bars, it'll make the same calories as perhaps something else. But if I had it in vegetables, potatoes, bit of meat, and cereal or something like that, it would be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
better nutritional breakdown. So we need to look at a diet of technology as opposed to an amount.
It's really about working towards empowering our children, then, isn't it? Of how they use
Mm,
social media, how they use technology, and obviously that we support, because maybe we need to be able to put boundaries in place there,
mm.
uh, because without boundaries, they won't put them in place. But it really is about empowerment, isn't it? About better use of it, and
Again, self-regulation. So
Mhm.
you have to teach them how to do it. I also use the example of, rather than telling a child how much they can do, is charge up the device and take the charger away and say you have 100% charge. You're not getting this charger back for 3 days. So you manage your own usage by looking at your dial. Do you know what I mean? When you're on the Lewis and the phone is going down, you're much more savvy about what you're using it for rather than scrolling because I might need it for a phone call and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're teaching them to regulate their own desire. And the other thing, I'll leave it on this. I think you could take everything off the internet, everything inappropriate. You could clean it all up and have a perfectly squeaky clean, no pornography, no cyberbullying, no anything. You'd still have a kid who spent 9 hours watching cats on skateboards. So that's not regulation of content. That's regulation of human desire. So if you want children to be better at technology, work on the human, not the technology.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Come here, absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very, very busy. It'd be lovely to speak to you again. So I might try and catch you down the road.
Not at all.
Within your busy schedule.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.